With coronavirus surging and no more stimulus, and the economy that is continuing to struggle, the number of homeless people has unsurprisingly increased, even in places where you have eviction bans that have been upheld locally during this crisis. So now, wait, then how come if we have a national moratorium on evicting people, then how is it that more homeless people or more people are being made homeless? Well, it turns out that landlords have been getting a little crafty and been figuring out ways in order to kick people out without violating these eviction bans. So now, according to renters nationwide, landlords have been skirting COVID-19 eviction moratoriums by doing such tactics such as changing locks, removing trash containers so that people have nowhere to put their trash, and in one case, literally unbolting a door right off an apartment. Oh, great. Awesome. So now, these people had told state attorneys general that they were kicked out of their homes after landlords had accused them of petty violations. For example, smoking cigarettes inside the unit, which they may or may not have done, or failing to take the hitches off mobile homes. So this is like real dirty, underhanded stuff. And so the reason, of course, is, hey man, look, you can't pay the rent, so I'm gonna kick you out. That's it. Like, and since I can't legally kick you out because of coronavirus, and that's the reason, of course, why a lot of people have fallen behind on the rent to begin with, then I'm gonna just invent ways to do it. Haha, take that. So now, one person, Heidi Statch, was one of those people that ended up losing her apartment. She lost her job due to the pandemic and fell behind on her rent, as millions of Americans have, sadly. She says that her landlord had found an end run to Wisconsin's eviction ban. See, instead of starting a court process, he instead sent her a notice to vacate this summer because he decided not to renew her lease. And that's just one of the different tactics they use that is now becoming widespread as we continue to not have any sort of stimulus to help regular people. So now Eric Dunn, director of litigation at the National Housing Law Project, points this out. He said that since the pandemic started, the courts had frozen their dockets and had moratoriums. We've seen a huge spike in tactics from landlords to get people out, including changing locks, cutting off utility service, refusing to make repairs, making threats, providing misinformation, and any other creative way to accuse someone of lease violations that fit the exceptions in the moratorium. So they are really, really trying to figure this out. They will go through and they'll say, okay, can't kick them out for this, this, or this, or this, but we can for this. So now tricks and intimidation behind the scenes, of course, add to more overt efforts by landlords to legally evict tenants. With statewide bans largely expired and federal protection from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention moratorium nearing its final days, according to HuffPost, tenant advocates like Dunn fear things will only get worse. USA Today also reviewed hundreds of complaints about landlords filed this summer by consumers with attorneys general in 7 different states, including Maryland, Missouri, Ohio, Washington State, and Wisconsin. Landlords, they told the state agencies, hiked rents during the pandemic. What? Now understand how like disgusting that is, right? So now we're in an economic slowdown. We've had, these lockdowns, which have closed restaurants. People are laying off. Some small businesses are actually going out of business. And the response from some of these landlords is to go, I'm gonna increase the rent. I want more money. Wait, and these are people, of course, that lost their jobs in a lot of cases. Now, these people, again, couldn't pay the rent, couldn't pay their utility bills. And so these same landlords would then skip out on basic maintenance and letting conditions, of course, deteriorate in those places, leaving renters a choice between leaving on their own or living with mold outbreaks and infestations of bed bugs, roaches, and maggots. Jesus. And a lot of these tenants, by the way, they tried to get help from the local government. And the government said, we can't, we don't have any, there's no way for us to help you. Sorry, you're pretty much on your own. And so they said that they couldn't help because wrongful evictions, that's what this would be, considered as, had to be fought in court. Well, the problem with that, of course, is that if you're somebody who lost your job and couldn't afford to pay your rent, you really think that you could afford to take this to court? Oh, yeah, no, let me just reach deep right up into my ass and pull out, $200 an hour for a fucking lawyer. No, that's insane. Whereas these landlords likely are companies that have legal representation at the ready. They can afford to do this, and so they can afford to defend themselves in court. And so if you can't fight it, you're going to get evicted. And then you're not going to be able to have any place to live, which happened to lots of people. One of them, Tasha Tavener, she said that she ended up taking her and her 4 children and camping out in the woods after she lost her job. And so she was the one who had actually witnessed men pull the door off the front of her apartment to prevent her from living there. Jesus. Others, like elderly residents on Social Security, people who are unemployed, single mothers especially, said that they were pushed into homelessness where they could not even take basic steps to protect themselves against the coronavirus, which is, the whole reason why we're all in this position to begin with. COVID. I mean, it's horrifying. Now, Stotch, going back to her, now she's the mother of a 15-year-old daughter with special needs, with disabilities. So she couldn't pay her rent. Her rent is about $850. She came up short, and she said, look, hey, look, I can't pay you the whole thing, but maybe let me try to pay you as much as I can until we start to get this thing, start to get back up to work and so I can make my income again. Just please, we got nowhere to go. And again, she was just given orders to get out. I will not renew your lease. She said, quote, it was devastating. I was confused and I was crying and it felt like I was having a panic attack. I lost my job. And now I had to basically beg someone to let us live somewhere instead of a homeless shelter. Which, again, not a good place if you're trying to avoid coronavirus. Now, she was able to eventually get a job. But because of the actions of the landlord, she took a hit on her credit, for one, and she ended up having to move across town. So she had to take her daughter out of the school, change school districts, which again is difficult for somebody normally, but now even more so with someone who has special needs. And then she actually had to pay more for the same kind of apartment. She had to pay a higher price. She said, quote, in the middle of this, it's a lot to pay for rent, plus a new security deposit on such short notice, while everyone is still freaking out about the pandemic. I mean, it's horrifying. And so now one big reason, again, why this is happening, other than the existence of coronavirus, is the fact that the government, the federal government, is not helping the states. They are not giving the states money and municipalities money, and they're not giving the people money. Okay. And so not only that, but those eviction moratoriums have ended. They actually ended back in July. And so we haven't had a stimulus package or anything to renew that stuff since then. You had the extended unemployment benefits that had ran out back in July 31st. Now you had that, the moratoriums, and on July 25th. And then we've been going for months and months without any sort of additional stimulus. Is it any wonder why people are suffering? Is it any wonder why people are losing their homes? Why they're getting tossed out in the streets, in the snow, having to camp out in the woods, getting, or living in a place that obviously doesn't want them, dealing with mold and pests. It's disgusting. Just horrible. And look, you had state bans as well, but even those state bans had ended over the summer or in fall. And now, of course, we have this new COVID surge, and we still have nothing. And there was one thing that was protecting some of these people that was enacted on September 4th. This is the CDC. And they had this order that basically had one goal: prevent evictions for non-payment of rent during the pandemic. And obviously, as you can see from the story, it wasn't at all effective. And it's because the CDC's rule is full of exemptions and legal definitions that are a bit tricky. They're tricksy. The current CDC order, for example, set to expire on December 31st, specifies that evictions for non-payment of rent can be prevented if renters fill out a form declaring that they make less than $99,000, are trying to make partial payments, and would likely be homeless if evicted. Rent still accrues and is due eventually. So that's the other thing. It is not a cancellation of rent. It just says, well, you don't have to pay it now, but it all adds up later. Oh, great. So you're starting from behind. And then when you're done with this pandemic, you're still going to be even farther behind. Now, that CDC order does come with criminal penalties for people who, landlords specifically, that kick people out unlawfully. But neither the agency nor the Department of Justice had answered any questions on whether a single landlord had been prosecuted under these laws. That order also offers 5 other reasons evictions can move forward: criminal activity, threats to other residents, damage to property, violation of building codes, and this one's important, or violation of any other aspect on a lease. You know that they can put pretty much anything in a lease, right? So some of the limits, for example, is like, oh, you can't have somebody stay over for that long. If you stay more than 2 days in a row or 3 days in a row, you are considered to be living there. Then, well, if we find that somebody's there in that apartment, sad day for you, we'll kick you out. In fact, Dunn said landlords could find ways to use those exemptions to evict a non-paying renter. For example, people that add a satellite dish. That's a lease violation in some places. Or when a boyfriend stays over more nights than allowed. If a landlord truly wants to evict someone, says Andrew Arend, you know they can find a reason. And of course they will. They absolutely will. And the thing is, again, the only policies that we can do, like, that would actually stop this, unfortunately, we're not doing. We need cash assistance from the government in order to, get to these people. We need to cancel the rents and the mortgages. We need $2,000 a month for UBI for every single person. We need reinstatement of $600 benefits per month for people who are unemployed. Additionally, that's what we need. That's what we need, and we're not getting it. And I don't think we're going to get it. And look, right now, everybody's getting screwed. Okay, you've got tenants that can't pay. We've got some landlords who might actually be decent people, not these guys. These are shit people. But I can't go and say that 100% of every single landlord is a terrible person and isn't trying to, at least work with their tenants that can't pay to try to figure things out. I'm thinking of like the elderly couple that, had an additional home and they were like, oh, we'll let someone live in there and, all that and we'll fix it up and all that stuff. I'm not thinking of like the faceless corporation that is likely doing most of these things, or the vindictive person that doesn't care, or the slumlord owner like Jared Kushner, who, by the way, is also trying to kick people out of his apartment complex that he owns, and using these similar methods. And look, let me give you some more examples of shitty landlords while I'm on that, right? USA Today's review of complaints filed with various state attorneys general showed landlords across the country attempted to raise rents on financially struggling tenants, as I mentioned before, and then turned to extreme measures to evict them when they couldn't pay. One Missouri renter said she was forced to leave her apartment during the pandemic after her landlord raised the rent about $35 a month and a monthly dog fee by about $5. Well, so it's an extra $40 a month. For people on Social Security and disability, people who are elderly, well, that might be a little too much. So there's that. Others in the state complained of steeper hikes despite job losses and hardships. Near the Ozarks, for example, residents of a shuttered 9-hole golf resort that was converted into an apartment complex say that their landlord didn't just, increase it by, $40 or $50, $100. No. Their rent was tripled. They not only tripled the rent, but then threatened people with eviction and had them work under the table to repair the derelict units in order to pay off their debt. Really? Okay. Now, the former timeshare property, by the way, had been neglected for years. They had mold on the stairs, ceilings, curtains. Residents complained to the state about holes in the walls and the floor where roaches, ants, and bed bugs were found. Another tenant lived in a 2-bedroom unit for 2 years when it changed ownership at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. In February, that tenant lost her job and was struggling to make the $75 a month rent and asked if she could split it into 2 different installments. Hey, I'll pay the first now and then I'll pay the rest later this month. That landlord, instead of working with her, said, no, we're going to email you a notice to vacate, and then tripled the rent to $1,500 a month. And then, again, she had to either pay it or get the fuck out. And so those are some examples of the complaints that we are seeing from people who, again, lost their job through no fault of their own, entered tough times because of this coronavirus pandemic, and are now suffering for it. Garbage people. And I understand, you can't just live somewhere for free. I get that. I get that some landlords have bills to pay. I totally understand that. That's why, again, I'm calling for not only a cancellation of rent, but a cancellation of mortgages as well. And a $2,000 a month UBI for every single person. That way, bills still get paid. The mortgages, again, you don't have to pay on the mortgage. So somebody who's a person who rents out these apartments doesn't have to pay on that. And it doesn't accrue. No, literally, it's frozen. It does not add up. It doesn't accrue. And so that really, in my mind, the only way we're going to be able to get through this pandemic is if we do something like that. Because if we don't, again, within the next month or so, we could see up to 20 to 30 million people get evicted. And again, during a pandemic, anytime people are evicted, it's horrible. But then, now you have a pandemic. Now it's even worse. Now they're going to spread the virus around. And everybody, again, is falling behind. Republicans in Congress have left us high and dry after presiding over the massive transfer of wealth to rich people and corporations. Renters are screwed. Some landlords are screwed. Local businesses are screwed. And attempts to control the virus also screwed. Everybody's screwed. Homeless camps, for example, are not places that are known for being super neat and tidy and free of disease. And again, all of this could be avoided if we actually had a government that worked for us. Because even though, again, it's bad right now, it's going to get worse. And really, the only thing that's standing in the way is corporate Democrats and Republicans, Mitch McConnell. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.